the traditional route of doing GCSEs, A-levels, degree in something, and then you come out with that. I don't think that delivers you any certainty anymore.
Welcome to the Ground Investigation Podcast, a show featuring interviews and insights from leaders in the geotechnical and geo-environmental business world. Join host Michael Taylor as he discusses the ups and downs of running a business in the GI industry, getting geological experts to share their learnings and lessons, as well as their plans for the future, highlighting what they think will improve the ground investigation industry moving forward. Now, here is your host, Michael Taylor.
Welcome to the Ground Investigation Podcast. Today we have our new guest, Matt Ewing. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm not doing too bad, Michael. Not too bad at all. It's great to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me on.
More than welcome, more than welcome. So if you've listened to the show before, you'll know the next question, which is, I was wondering if you give us a quick background about yourself and then we can get started.
All right, no problem. Well, I've been in the industry now a good, what am I? I'm 51 now, so that means I started in it when I was 16. So that's many years. 16, 26, 36, 46. Yeah, exactly. All of those, maybe 32 years or more than that. My maths has left me. But I left school at 16 to get out and enjoy myself. Fell into doing some land surveying in the early days. Then went off to university as that good old rites of passage. Came out of university and then went straight into civil engineering when I was 24, 25. And then ever since then, been ploughing that wonderful world of civil engineering. And then for the past 5-6 years, been working directly for BAM Ritchies, so the ground engineering geotechnical division of BAM Ritchies, the big tier 1 civil engineering contractor who I've been with for 23 years, but the past 6 or so been doing a different role in business development for BAM Ritchies. So that's kind of me. Okay. So, fantastic career so far. Like I say, over the 50 hill, but still now changed careers within BAM and got another, well, depends when the retirement age is these days, but got another 15, 16 years of doing work within civil engineering, which I'm thoroughly looking forward to.
Excellent. Okay, so you said you left school. So you left at 16. You went to work for a land surveying company. So what got you into that and what kind of were your activities there?
Well, I left school at 16 because I fell out of love with A-levels. Because I just couldn't relate the what I was being taught in my A-level maths to what I did out and about on a day-to-day basis, and there was no connection, no correlation for me. The little land surveying firm that I went to join was in the next village across from me, down in Somerset. I was living in Cheddar, and the next village was Axbridge, and there was a company there which my brother worked at the Simmons Survey Partnership, and this was in the 88, so it was late 80s, which was boom time. There was plenty of money around, and they were always looking for people. And Cheddar was a small village, obviously tourist destination, but small village just outside Bristol. So I thought, well, what should I go and do instead? Maybe I learn some money and kind of get some freedom, get out and about and do those kind of things. It was a pretty traditional reason for leaving school at 16, I'd have said. So I went off and earned £3,000 a year as a survey assistant when I joined them. Big money, which then obviously I had to pay a good chunk of that to my mum for staying at home, paying the rent and everything that went with it. But yeah, that's why I left school, just because I couldn't. The A-levels I'd chosen were what I wanted to do, but I just couldn't relate and enjoy what I was studying at the time. So I just thought I did something different. My brother had been, like I say, at that company already, doing a slightly different role in the kind of data processing part of that. And I saw that he was planning to do a few years there and then go off to uni. So that's what I kind of saw that as a kind of a route to doing things and not just sticking with A-levels and thinking that was the be all or end all, and just like getting out there, doing something, enjoying it. Because I didn't know what I was letting myself into, to be brutally honest, because I didn't know what land surveying and everything that went with that was when I jumped on board. But yeah, it was one of those great jobs where you were just out in the fresh air every day. You learned every day what you were doing, the purpose of it, because it was old school. This is many years ago, where a lot of the work, it was hand inputted data logging when you were doing your surveys through theodolites and EDM sat on top. You were hand working out your traverses and all your main control and all that kind of stuff. So I was more likely doing actual mathematics in my job that was more advanced than what the A level was, and I was doing it and I was relating to it, and I really enjoyed that, because I think I've always been a bit of an engineer anyway, so I always enjoyed that bit of overcoming the problems and the challenges and the success of closing my control surveys to a couple of seconds or whatever it may be. So, and I just really brought into that, and the fact that I was getting some money out of it as well, getting to stay away, travel around the UK. It was in the day of subsistence when it was pay per night, and we'd get £17 a night, I think, for our digs, our meals, and everything else that went with it. Those were the days. But yeah, that's why I kind of moved across from school, because I just couldn't see that there was, I don't know, enough to keep me in school, and there was more opportunity by going out, doing a job, earning some money, but still having a bit more of a longer term view of what I could then do once I'd put in 4 or 5 years into that role.
Yeah. Okay. So instead of going to go and GCSEs, A levels, then degree, you've came out, you've got a job, so you're going to gain some real world experience dealing with all sorts of things, and also you're going to earn some money, and then sort of circle back. Would you advise other people to do that route?
I would suggest, I wouldn't. I don't feel compelled that the traditional route of GCSE A-level degree is the right thing. You know, I love that cartoon, I think, that's out there, where there's all these animals lined up in a row, and the guy in front of them says, right, today we're going to test you on climbing trees. And there's like a monkey, a fish, a crab, an elephant, and all of this, because we're all so individual that there can't be one size to fit everybody. And I think now there are these options. I know the rules are a bit stricter now, that you have to stay in full-time education till you're 18. But I think there's so many opportunities to do different things, of getting out and earning while you learn, you know, the apprenticeship scheme and stuff like that. I'm a massive advocate of it, because I see that value, because that's kind of the closest thing I relate to my education, is that apprenticeship kind of approach, where I earned the basics and the fundamentals by doing it in the real world and being paid for it. And then after the 5 years of doing that, I did get the unconditional offer to go to university to then get my HND in engineering surveying, which was real fulfillment, in the fact that, wow, a university sees me as somebody who, please come to us, unconditional offer. There's no ties. We want you to come to us. And obviously I decided to do that, because I would say, I'd argue, a bit more in those days, it was still an experience going to uni. It was part of life, what you did. But I went there as a mature student, because I was over 21, because I'd done the years out working, which was an interesting position to be in, thinking somebody thinks I'm mature as well. This is a bit of a long shot. But you know, I had a fantastic few years there, did really well, again, because I could relate everything I was studying in that 3-year sandwich course to things I did and I was doing. So the maths seemed fine by me, whether it was bloody observing bearings by the stars and setting out dual carriageway by turning your angles through the night and all those kind of things. It was fantastic stuff. And I just, because it was relatable, and I think that's the key to it. And I think that's where apprenticeships really tick the boxes. You can relate the classroom study and the classroom environment to your day-to-day job. So the values there, the connections there. And I think that's the biggest struggle with further education and how that works, because I just don't think the traditional route of doing GCSEs, A levels, degree in something, and then you come out with that, I don't think that delivers you any certainty anymore. In the past, it did, because a degree qualification was held up as something, and it was held up as a necessity. But now I think as employers, we look for personal attributes. We look for people's outlook on life. We look for how they engage and how they just want to be part of a team and things like that. Very much more is what we want. Whereas an experience, because I think experience is key to just about everything, but impossible to get if nobody's going to employ you.
Yes.
If you haven't got the experience to get the job. So I think, that's my take on it. I think that there is a better way to get to where you want to be that doesn't just revolve around ticking the boxes and doing those traditional things, especially now the cost of university, the challenges around all of that, the poor people that were in uni through COVID and everything that went with that. There's better ways to do things, and the drive now, certainly we see it post-COVID, is for people wanting and realizing that they can work from home, be closer to home, and the civil engineering requirement that you need to be a bit nomadic is really difficult to lose, but there's a real press that might have to really shift a bit. Whereas when I was young and I first got into civil engineering, I loved the working away thing. It was a huge plus because it was just the experience. You became a team. You were like back on your own feet. But the weird thing was you were paid. That subsistence payments were good payments. And there's loads of stories about the old DIY accommodation that we all had on our projects to keep costs down, so that then we could set money aside for holidays, mortgages, whatever it may be.
Of course.
You sacrifice something to benefit something else, and that they were great days. And I do feel a bit now that nowadays there's a bit of a loss out there, that a lot of the younger people coming into the industry aren't getting to experience those things that would really shape them and set them up for things later in life. And just because the nature of the way the world's turning and moving, those younger people aren't getting to experience those things. And I know there's many other reasons around that that we need to be kind of aware of and conscious of. But I always find it interesting. This is a kind of one of my little things, that in companies where you have the need to work away, that we don't run a list of people who are happy to work away. What we actually run a list of is people that don't want to work away, which then makes you assume everybody else does. But they don't really. I just think you should always run a list of people who really want to, because they might want to be saving money. They might want to just explore the country. And there's loads of things. I think there's ways that we can just make things that bit better and get people be more flexible to cater for all of those needs that are out there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's important that businesses are a bit flexible. We work with some who are just not flexible at all, extremely rigid. Like, no, this is the office, you have to come here. But you live in a part of the country where there's not that many people there. We're like, well, they have to. And that's they've been looking for their person for about a year and a half. Whereas someone that can be a bit more flexible, we could probably find them someone who is happy to do that. So being rigid, it doesn't really work out well.
We just got to maintain that swings and roundabouts. Sometimes they're big swings and sometimes it's a really massive roundabout. But overall, it all comes back and works out in the end, as long as we keep talking about it. I think that's the bigger thing. The more we just make sure people express what is right for them, then the better we can all make sure that we deliver that for our employees, and they get given the opportunities they want and get to do what they want to do.
It's important that people discuss things, and this is kind of a good avenue for doing that. Sometimes we'll talk to people, about pay, because some of the pay in the ground investigations of some of the companies is just not good whatsoever. So these things, should be discussed. Whereas a lot of people, and I suppose it's because they work for a company, they don't want to say too much because they see as their umbrella brand is whoever they work for, and they feel like if they say anything, they're representing them. And in some ways, potentially they could be construed as that, but in other ways, if you don't discuss these matters, then in another 20 years, people will still be, skirting around the same issues. So it's time to discuss things really and move on if we can.
100% agree with that.
in terms of subsistence, I mean, when I first started, I stayed in a tent in Lockerbie in December, £6 a night. It wasn't, bizarrely, it was quite warm for December. But yeah, just to pocket that extra money, essentially.
Yeah.
Get up at
I've
2:30, drive up there, so you get your one day for that, and all those little bits, especially as a grad engineer, just all those little bits that can take you out of having, bugger all money, really.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I constructed many a small sleeping area within a canteen over the years when I was first out of uni and on site working away from home. Yeah, just put as a partition in there and a door.
Yeah,
it's just big enough for my airbed. That'll do.
Yeah,
and I know people might look back on that and look at it now and compare it to what we have now, and that's not that right. But at the time, it was fine. And now we have bunker bins, which are amazing, but they're pretty cheap. You can get them for, and they are great facilities that we can now provide on site for people that work away, and it is like a bit of a home from home. So I think people miss out on that because they're just driven to wanting to just work within 60 miles of home or something. So I think that's a real pity that they miss out on the camaraderie, the building of a team, the kind of getting to know everybody and understanding, how people operate and what goes on. So I think there's always more that could be done in that area.
Agreed. So you mentioned bunker bins then. What's a bunker bin? I've never heard of a bunker bin.
You never heard of a bunker?
No.
Come on, a bunker bin. It must be a brand name that I've just thrown around and somebody's sitting somewhere going, oh, excellent, good to see the name there. It's just it's a 24-foot bloody container, isn't it? Kitted out with a couple of bedrooms and a bathroom in the middle. You just plug and play, stick it into your main power, and off you go. You then got two bedroom facilities for your team straight away. So we always used to have little bunker bin sites on our projects, or find a local farmer who would be happy for us to drop a few into his yard, power them up, and off we go.
Nice.
And that would be the way we'd therefore create affordable accommodation on our projects.
Yes, that's a good idea. So is that the case of you just provide the engineers or the drillers with that? So then there's no subsistence. There's just maybe a payment for food?
No, we were. It's a way of providing accommodation. They would still be entitled to their payments for what they got, and then they would then be deducted an amount of that for using the accommodation that we provide. So it was all fairly paid for, fairly funded, and that is the way that we would provide those that accommodation, because you can when you, especially wherever the work goes in geotech, wherever it is, you'll end up in some lovely, beautiful locations which nobody can afford to stay in unless you're on holiday for a weekend or a fortnight. So therefore, you have to create something that enables you to actually deliver the works.
Yeah, no, agreed. Did BAM buy them then? These bunker bins, or do they just sort of lease them?
No, they were always rented, and that's what you generally covered the cost of. In what you paid to stay there would be the cost of these things, with then a markup for the power and water that you'd be using as well. But they were very cost effective compared to doing anything else.
Okay. That sounds like a great idea. I've never heard of them. So you in your sort of first role, you joined as a chain person and left as a land surveyor. What was the advancing through the ranks like? And also, before you answer that question, what is a chain person? Because I've seen this advertised in the paper many years ago when I was looking for a job myself. But what is it?
Well, I was being very PC by putting chain person, obviously, because I joined as a chain boy. But obviously I was wary that is now possibly an outdated term.
Yes, you'll be attacked for that one.
But it's just, in those days, it was the poor guy or whoever it was who held the leveling staff for when the land surveyor was doing the leveling and the observing. It would be the one on the pogo stick with the prism out in the middle of the fields banging in the pegs. You just did all the more labor-intensive bits of going out and doing a land survey. But, when you were doing the survey, you'd have the surveyor would be on the pogo doing his sketches, doing his bit of work, and you would be the one doing the observing and everything through the EDM, total station, whatever you had on the tripod. So it was very much the second second person in that team that would be sent out to do a survey, because that was in the days when you didn't have autonomous kit and the things that did everything by themselves. Nowadays, you just see one-man teams charging around the place, setting up an autonomous total station, and they run around with their prism and do everything themselves. So that's where it all started, and you did that role because that gave you the understanding of what doing a survey was, because you did everything with the surveyor without the responsibility, I would say, because that land surveyor was in charge of delivering the works and what was required. So it was just a natural progression that as you went through doing those things, the land surveyor would let you do other bits and pieces over time, and you would then just grow in experience of what was required. And I remember my first survey on my own with another chain person was of a graveyard, so not too difficult one to go and get wrong. A nice rectangular field with just lots of gravestones in. So I remember that being my first one, which I got right, which was okay. Nice. And second one after that was a waterworks, which was a completely different beast. But yeah, it was great. It was just nice to develop in a very linear way, because you couldn't take the next step until you could kind of demonstrate to who you were working with that you understood what you were doing. Because in those days, again, you gathered all the data out in the field, and then you had to bring it back to the office to process it, and then you'd print it, and then you then have to edit it manually, the data points that you created, if things weren't quite right or things had been connected in the wrong way, because everything was through strings of points that you would create, and then you'd have to modify those things, and then you'd then put it into the drafting room in the advent of AutoCAD. That's dating myself again, where people would then.
So you're actually you were the first person to trial the Leica GPS system in the UK. How did that come about then? And what was the result of the trial?
That was interesting stuff. That was the just through the connections that the business had at Simmons Survey. We used quite a lot of Leica geodat equipment that we had then, and then we were just fortunate enough that the system was coming into the UK, and so they asked if we would be happy as a business to just give it a go and see what happened. And so we did some very local trials, and that was in the days where we spent many hours trying to find trig points on the top of churches, where you would have to set up your base station and leave it there all day recording data, while you then took your roving station out to your main control that you might be wanting to set up, and you'd have to then set that up for a few hours, because there was a finite amount of satellites in the sky at the time, and you needed signals from at least 4 satellites for it to resolve its position relative to the base station when it was recording. And so sometimes you would be out at a position in the middle of nowhere on a trig pillar or a new control point, and you'd be there for hours waiting for enough satellites to appear in the sky, because it was only using I think it was the US military satellites at the time when we started using it, but the only satellites were being used. So we did do a big job around Devonport. Devonport Dockyard crops up quite a bit for the main control for future works, which was an amazing job. I remember being down there for about a month, and I spent most of that month sat next to a GPS bit of kit for hours on end, waiting for satellites to come over the horizon for us to then get measurements from it. And then at the end of the day, you then had to process all of that data for resolution. And if satellites had dropped out or things hadn't been quite right, then you could realize you wasted a day because you didn't get the resolutions to meet, your sub 10 millimeter resolution that you wanted for these things. So it was great, because it was like, oh my God, it was like, to me, it was like, this is incredible. We're just using sat. And I remember at uni, I did my final year kind of dissertation on multipath, which is the bouncing of the signals from the satellites off buildings, giving you spurious results in your GPS positioning, and also in those days, it couldn't get through foliage very well, and the impact of just vegetation and trees. Because it was such a finite amount of satellites are in the sky. Nowadays, there's bloody hundreds. So GPS is something completely different, as we all know from our phones, cars, and everything else. It's a completely different world. But then, like I say, back in 1990, when it was first coming in and being used, it was fascinating, and we took a while to take off, but we did quite a lot of work with it and developed some, just kept using it with Leica, and it was really good to know we were at the forefront and knocking on blimmin' vicars' doors saying, do you mind if we go onto the roof of your church to set up this instrument so that we can do some surveying? And they were very curious about that. But no, it was really, really good to be part of it, and a really kind of something I fondly look back on.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so I mean they're quite standard now, aren't they? They're on kind of every ground investigation, and they're very good, very accurate pieces of kit. So you worked on the Heathrow Express, the sort of the year it collapsed. How can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, that was my year. I decided to still do a year out when I did my HND, even though I didn't have to because I'd done the 5 years of work beforehand. But yeah, so we ended up a few of us going to Heathrow for Balfour Beatty, who were doing the Heathrow Express project, and if I'm not mistaken, it was the first use of the new Austrian tunnelling method, sprayed concrete kind of stuff, being used for tunnels in the UK. And we were there in the survey and monitoring team. A lot of the guys from the Channel Tunnel had come up as this was the next big tunnelling project, so we were put into their team, and our role was to mainly spend most of our time monitoring all the areas where the caverns for the stations and the running tunnels were being constructed. And a lot of that revolved around Terminal 4, Central Terminal area, and some other areas as well. And we spent a lot of our time using digital levels, doing lots of millimeter accuracy surveying to make sure there was no movement. But the bit that was interesting about it was we did all the data capture and data gathering, and then we gave that to another business which had been employed to analyze the data and to provide outputs for other people to actually do something with. And I remember we had, when we were doing the leveling, we'd kind of see movements, but not grand. It was very gradual when we look back on what we'd actually done. But because the actual collapse itself was very, very dramatic and very catastrophic when it happened at the Central Terminal area, when the main shaft and the surrounding running tunnel was lifted. And it was quite an experience to be there. I remember we came into work the day after, and I don't think I then left work for about 8 or 12 weeks because we were just put on 24/7 working, monitoring all the main Central Terminal area car parks in the traditional way of observing targets which had been stuck everywhere to make sure nothing else was moving. And I remember being told a story that they only really noticed things happening when a foreman was sat in his office and his coffee started sliding across the table. And at that point, hit the alarm. Nobody was hurt. There was no issues in the actual collapse itself. And I think the report found that it was workmanship in the end of the actual application of the spray concrete, the Natam works, which meant that the work into the invert hadn't been completed to the required specifications. So the invert lifted, and as that lifted, everything else came down around it, and that's what formed the collapse. And I remember I'd never seen so many concrete wagons in all my life pumping foam concrete into the shaft itself and into those tunnels to arrest any more further movement in the main part of Heathrow, because obviously Heathrow was shut for a number of days when the main Central Terminal area collapsed. So it was quite incredible, the impact of it and seeing what was there and being around it, because you can't really comprehend it if you don't see it or experience it. And from that, and it was amazing how much effort went into trying to overcome. And I think that the solution was they then created the biggest shaft in Europe to create a new shaft around the old one, which had failed and they'd filled with foam concrete, to then dig down, recover everything that they'd foam concreted in, and then continue, but in a similar method again, but just with those much stricter controls to make sure it was going to be a success. There was no other movement elsewhere. Terminal 4 was fine. They just changed the design because of the concerns they had of what had happened at the CTA. But yeah, we were obviously, it was just a fascinating time to be there, because we were fed, watered. There was nothing like not made available to us while we were there doing these, critical monitoring works for those 12 weeks while things were put in place to make sure they could get to a solution. So it was quite extreme, and with, I guess I was one of the elder ones that was there, it still to me felt like, geez, this is bonkers. I wouldn't have thought this kind of thing would happen.
Yeah.
But the fact that we were around and it did happen, and it was just a real eye-opener to how then businesses then operate and move towards another solution, and then try and galvanize a team which is obviously quite demoralized because of what has happened, to then be invigorated or enthused to go ahead and do it all again, but this time it's going to be a great success. So there was a real effort to kind of really sell the solution as a great thing to make sure that the team brought into it. And there was quite a lot of team building efforts that were put in place to make sure it did succeed. And as I understand it, it did go on to not have any more challenges after that. And as we now, it's constantly running, and you don't hear anything much about the Heathrow Express other than it's running direct out of Paddington. I always hear it when I go into Paddington and talk about the Heathrow Express leaving from the platform, whatever.
Yeah. I suppose it must have reminded you the importance of the kind of work, really, because if it's not done correctly, then very bad things can happen.
Exactly, and I know that's what came out of it. I think there was a couple of findings. One was that intermediate business that was getting all the data was then obviously something wasn't quite right there to then wave some flags and sound some alarms. But that whole thing about right first time. You can't afford not to do it right first time, because, in construction, in construction, GI, civil, whatever it is, it'll always come round. It's a small enough world that if you think you've got away with something, you've only got away with it short term. At some point, and that could be years, you just don't know. And I think we've all got an obligation to do it right. And if doing it right costs money, then our clients have to understand that if they want it and they want it done right, this is what it's going to cost you. It's not going to cost you that small number, because that small number isn't going to give you what you've actually asked for. And you're going to have issues over that. I can't remember, somebody said to me that like the price somebody gives you for a bit of work tells you their culture, as well as telling you, how desperate they are for that job at the time. If they're pricing it cheap, it's because there's something about the way that they operate as a business that enables that to happen. And I'm not saying everything should be expensive. I'm a massive advocate of paying the right price for the right job. It's as simple as that. Cheap prices, and obviously the weird thing is cheap, you can only know it's cheap when you compare it to some price that's higher. So and the reason the high price is there might be other reasons for that, but the lowest priced is usually low for a reason, and it's not because they got smarter, it's not because of innovation, it's not because of something else, it's usually because they need the work, they don't do things that you hope they do, and those kind of things. So they're always very good, and you only find those out at a later date. And it's strange how many times people are willing to find out those issues by repeatedly accepting those lower prices, because not everything isn't the same. You can't ever, in my view, get the 3 prices for the bit of work from 3 different companies and think they're all going to provide you exactly the same thing. They've all taken a view.
Yeah, it's true. It's true because it's not like just buying a car. You're buying this make and model of a car. It's the same whether you buy it from this place to this place. So then it comes down to
Yep.
cost. But yeah, in something like the ground investigation, is you've got a service, you've got all the training, you've got how do they maintain their rigs. There's so many different things, and the companies that do go cheap, which I do think there is a fair few, then that can create problems later on, or it can create problems at the time. With the ground investigation, if you've got such a small margin, something goes wrong, they go poof, gone, profit margin.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, who has the enthusiasm to continue this next 8 weeks' work? So we're not going to make any money out of it. So then naturally, people will be like, right, we need to just get this done because we need to get out here onto a more profitable project, essentially.
I love the fact you mentioned that car analogy, because I've heard that a couple of times where people like to relate construction to cars, and like cars now are amazing, they're loads better, and actually they're cheaper than the past. So why isn't that the case? Well, the case is, when with a construction project, they're all pretty similar. But with cars, they're all pretty similar. But with cars, you go in and you still say, I want a different color. I want this different. I want that different. And actually, the car ends up being more expensive because of all those changes. It's exactly the same in our world. In GI, 6 boreholes here or 6 boreholes there, on the surface, they're going to look the same as in surface project-wise. But reality is the customers on each of those are going to be asking for completely different things. For those 6 holes, they're in completely different places, and so they're always going to be different. I don't like the fact that people draw those parallels. Well, surely construction should be getting cheaper because it's becoming more efficient and we just want all the same. That would be the case if a client who wanted a hospital or a bridge this week, next week wanted exactly the same bridge and hospital. Yes, we could do it more efficiently, but they don't. They want that bridge, but in a slightly different span with slightly different finish to satisfy the local requirements and all these kind of things. So it's all those differences that mean that we're always in a place where things never are going to be that simple. It's the specifiers and the ultimate clients. If they could be consistent in what they wanted, then they would consistently be able to get better value.
No, agreed. So after university, you had a kind of idea that you never really wanted to work for a contractor. So why was that then? So if we could fill us in.
I see. I remember it clearly. I remember it was at Nottingham still. I was near the Bell Inn, I think, the pub. And I walked in as we'd finished. I said, "Oh, geez, I hope I never end up working for a civil engineering contractor." Because that's the sharp end. That's the really spiky bit. Being an agency engineer, in my mind, an agency setting out engineer was right at the sharp end of everything. And I know I'd just done a HND in engineering surveying, so that was putting me in that place. I had a background of land surveying, which meant I understood all the maths and everything behind it, that I could solve problems, and I loved doing that. But because I had no experience really, apart, because even at Heathrow, that I wasn't responsible for setting anything out or being in control of those things. I was just surveying, observing and monitoring, data collecting. I just had this inherent nervousness around the fact that I was going to be sent on my first job to go and set out all the columns for some 40-story building, and I'd just be staring at it going, I haven't done this before. How do you do that? But I came back from uni, and the first thing I did was I was part of an agency, but fortunately supporting somebody in some setting out they were doing at a power station just outside Newbury, and the name always escapes me. And I was only there for a couple of weeks, and that was okay because I was never left to my own devices. But it wasn't a lack of skills or knowledge. It was just the lack of physically having done it. And I think that's quite overpowering, I would say, for some and for many. That first time doing something. But we all survived those first times in the end. It's never really as bad as we think. So I was it was just those thoughts. Oh, I don't want to do that. This really doesn't appeal to me. But those first few weeks as an agency, did those were right. And then I moved quickly to my first job with a permanent company with Johnston Construction. And it never really bothered me in the end. It's just something I always say when I talk to people about my beginnings and my past, that I just remember it really clearly saying, I hope I don't work for a civil engineering contractor because it's such,
for a civil engineer.
Yeah, it's just the exposure. As a setting out engineer, it all comes from there, doesn't it? It don't matter everything else. If that's wrong at the very beginning, your bridge isn't exactly where somebody wanted it. It's never going to look good. It's not going to want to have that on your CV. It was a beautiful bridge I built, just a half a meter in the wrong place.
And in the wrong rock. It's
Finding the right staff is hard, really hard. At GI Rec Limited, we understand the ground investigation market inside out and can make all the difference to your recruitment woes. You need to concentrate on running the business, which is very difficult to do without the correct number of qualified staff. We can help you get your time back and lower your stress levels. We only work with talented, referenced, and often entirely exclusive candidates across the ground engineering sector. We offer a retained service where we give a 100% guarantee of success of placement with your company. A guarantee of success. Wouldn't that be nice? It's not a dream, it's a reality for many of our happy customers. Get in touch with the team now to book a call. Just email info@girec.co.uk to book a call, or click the link in the show notes now.
So you say you worked for Johnson Construction. So you worked on some tunneling projects there then. So I've got a few of the sort of tunneling types here, or tunneling techniques. So drill and blast, compressed air, colliery arches, and shield. And then there's a word that I'm not going to try and pronounce, but I'll give it a go. Herrenneck?
Herrenknecht. It's the manufacture of the TBMs, of the tunnel boring machines. So it's just it's like calling a vacuum cleaner a Hoover. So Herrenknecht are just the worldwide brand that make many of the tunnel boring machines that are in the ground at the moment and around the place. But it was I'd never been on a tunnel. Well, I've been on Heathrow Express, but not part of the building bit. So going to Johnston as a tunnel setting out engineer was another real step into the unknown. But it was a fantastic job. And it's funny, actually, the past couple of days on LinkedIn, there's been some pictures posted about it. And I've been reminiscing with many people through comments and talking about that job, because it really was a scene setter for me and everything else that came later in my career, because you went through every emotion on that job. And the tunneling drives, tunneling's usually one or the other, but that project had rock in the ground, it had silty sand, it had alluvium, it had a bit of everything. So you had a bit of all the drive. So the compressed air drive was just a hand shield, which just pushed itself forward off the concrete rings it was building behind, excavated by an air-driven little bucket at the front, mucked away along the train lines, but in a compressed air environment to keep the water out. So that formed the barrier to make sure. So you had to go in and out through a decompression chamber and all those kind of things. So it was fascinating work in that drive. And then on another drive, it was just drill and blast. So just miners in there drilling holes, putting in the explosives, detonators and fire. I did a half-day course by, it might have been EPC or someone like that, which meant I could be a shot firer on that project. And it's amazing that the responsibility was just left with us as the young tunnel engineers to go down there, do the little winder on the box, and then plunge and fire the blast. And it was a real challenging time. And when we were on the Herrenknecht drive, where we had the tunnel boring machine running, we were going underneath the Western Supermare General Hospital car park, and we encountered some rock as we were going through that bit, and the drive hadn't expected that. So we actually had to blast a bit of that rock out. And we had to, while we were doing that, we had to inform the surgeons working above in the hospital when not to cut for when we did the blast, because the tunnel was quite shallow. So our vibration was quite key when we were doing this.
Okay. Wow, high pressure.
But it was a brilliant job. You had these
Yeah.
gangs of miners, and like I say, this is 95, I think, 95, 96. So a good few years ago, and this was the days of miners being miners, and it was all about bragging rights, and they would work 3 8-hour shifts in the 24, and they'd all be battling against each other for production. So
Yeah.
the pressure for us bloody engineers when we came down and had to move the laser for alignment in the tunnel, or we had to do
Hmm.
anything that might in any way interfere with their production targets. It was
Yeah.
tough, but it was done all
Get
in
an angry
the
miner.
yeah, but it was all done with a bit of a smile as well. And when
Hmm.
we socialised with them, Western weren't that happy. It was chaos,
Yeah.
but
Uh-huh.
it was great. They were gentle giants, but like I say, you didn't want to upset them in the tunnel or in the shaft,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. That
Yeah.
was their domain. But
Yeah.
it was a brilliant job, and it gave me so much understanding of the way things work, how to get
Hmm.
on with people that clearly don't want to get on with you, but
Yeah.
without you, they can't do their job because they haven't got a
Yeah.
laser to follow on the front of their bloody tunneling machine. Met some brilliant people that taught me so much, and from that, I came out pretty fearless with regards to what I could then go on and do, because
Okay.
I hadn't known anything about tunneling delivery before I went on that job, and I came out with like a CV full of I've done a bit of this.
Hmm.
And so that was great. And it really gave me a grounding to then just think, well, everything's really possible, isn't it? If you're willing to learn and you're
Yeah.
willing to embrace what those around you are kind of telling you,
Yeah.
then you just get enough knowledge though that makes it possible for you to do what you've been asked to do. You don't have to go over the top, but it was a fantastic job, and it really did set the foundations for me saying, yeah, this is great. Going to continue doing this because it's just so enjoyable and so rewarding. Because it was a brilliant project, and like I say, those posts on LinkedIn these past couple of days have really kind of made me reminisce and kind of think back to
Yeah.
what it was like then. Yeah, it was a riot.
So being on that project, it kind of raised your ceiling in your mind a little bit. Then, did it? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, you just, it was such an environment where you had to overcome so many challenges that we had on
Hmm.
that project in just getting it delivered and
Yeah.
working with them. And like I say, they were engineering challenges, personnel challenges from here, there, and everywhere. But it just meant, yeah, well, when you can put that kind of into your, use that corny phrase, toolkit or whatever, and you can put it there,
Yeah.
put it as an experience, then
Hmm.
you can always draw on that in the future and say, well, I've dealt with that in the past. This is
Hmm.
this is fine. It's not an issue.
Fair enough. So you were there for about 4 years. Was that
Yep.
the most interesting project that you were on?
For Johnson's, yeah, because I think it just set me up to have the confidence for doing whatever else was ahead of us. And Johnson's were very much a water focused business. They were taken over by Molam and became part of Molam while I was there. And then they continued in that kind of arena because they had this specialist bit around tunneling. But yeah, so it was the most varied and the most engaging project that I delivered with them. And so it kind of set me up to enjoy the other stuff that I did. And then I think it was 4 or 5 years I was with them before I then moved on. Well, didn't move on too far, but moved on to be with BAM.
To be with BAM. Okay, so that's 2001 then. So you arrived there as a sub-agent, started working at
Yep.
Davenport Dockyard projects delivering a nuclear transfer rail route. So what was that like
Yep.
then? Because I imagine it would have been a slightly cloak and dagger, a bit secretive, bit slightly different things to get onto it.
Yeah, 100%. Lots of challenges to get in there for security clearance and to get there. But I was there yesterday. How amazing is that? That just yesterday I was down there again. And when I
Really?
when I booked in for my
Yeah.
day pass, they didn't take a new picture because they used my old picture. And that was my old picture from when I first was there. So I was walking around on my with a security badge of this guy who was 22 years younger than what the face was up above. I was just looking at it going, oh, those were the days. But yeah, it was that. Yeah, that was the D154 major project that they were doing down there. And there was a bit of everybody doing stuff. And it was, it's pretty well known that Devonport is now the base for all the nuclear subs, etc., and all that as an MOD base. So when we were there back then, we were creating a new route for them to move around fuel from the submarines that were there. And it was a hell of a project. It was just naturally very challenging when you get into these environments because of the nature of what they are. Quality is king because they can't have defects in the world when you're dealing with nuclear fuels and those kind of things. Very much like Hinkley Point C, defects aren't possible. So everything has to be right first time. And again, it gets ingrained into you, and it's just the way it has to be. It always takes a bit longer. It always costs a little bit more than you think. But the reality is, if it's right first time as it's done, there's none of those follow-on costs or those hidden things that come along later that weirdly cost you a load more than whatever you spent getting it right in the first place anyway. So there was a great team. I knew a few people already who had moved down there because I got the call to join BAM Nuttall from the agent that was there, who had been an agent at Johnston. So he'd moved, and then I got the call from him, had an interview in Eastern Gordano Services on the M5, as you did in those days.
Yeah.
A cup of coffee and a pastry with the HR director. And it was a great move. It was a brilliant job. It was down in Plymouth, when Plymouth was a bit more lively. So it was a good job to be working on and a good place to be staying and enjoying yourself. So again, it really did make it a job that had a bit of everything thrown into it. It was, like I say, it was challenging because of the environment we're in, frustrating, and can sometimes, you think, are we ever going to get this done? But the engineering that was involved, it was real challenging stuff for the turnouts and turntables and things we had to create and deliver for the new train that would be trundling around the port, moving things around. But no, thoroughly enjoyed it. Stayed in the Barbican, which is a lovely place. I was very fortunate to be able to crash there while I was staying down there. So there's always pluses. And so, had no complaints at all about moving there. And I've had no complaints since, so I wouldn't still be here now.
Yeah, definitely. So you delivered a fair few sort of civil engineering infrastructure schemes across the Southwest over the 16 years, progressing to senior agent. Do you have any setbacks during that time? And if so, what were they, and what did you learn from them?
It's interesting. I was mulling this over about setbacks. Yeah. It's funny. I had a couple. I think the biggest setbacks in all of those years have just been not delivering a project as hoped at the outset. There's been no personal challenges and things like that. It's been pretty good, I must admit. I've had some great bosses, been supported by some great people throughout those years. So I think I've only ever really once felt like this is bloody miserable. This isn't work. This isn't fun. This isn't anything that I've kind of signed up for. And that was just one particular project. It was a beautiful job, but it just threw so many challenges at us that unfortunately we'd signed up to on a bloody lump sum basis.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get anywhere with it.
Okay.
But we still had to deliver it, and we still made sure it was like as good as it could be, and was a great job. But yeah, it was a proper money. We're trying to think of the word now. Well, I lost a fortune, but it was a great job, and it was a real nice job. But yeah, that was the one job that made me really think about oh, there's something not
Yeah.
enjoying this, and it was sad really, because there were some other fantastic bits and pieces that we
Hmm.
delivered and teams I worked with, and that's what I loved about it in that role as a senior agent with a team delivering £10 million projects that we all as a team loved delivering and really embraced and really wanted to make sure we gave it our best. And that's what I loved about delivery and being in the operational side, working with great people for a great business that kind of really stuck to its commitments that we'd set out to at day one on those projects.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we all go through a project or two that we don't like, but the fact that you stayed there, you
Yeah,
got through it. Some people wouldn't. Some people just start looking elsewhere. So it builds
yeah.
up a bit of
Well, you
resistance and resilience in yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's it. You have to be resilient, and you have to understand that. Yeah, you're very much, when you're the agent, senior agent, you're there representing the business, and you're responsible for the outcome of that project that you're part of. And yeah, you can't run away from that. That wouldn't help you in the future. It wouldn't help you with anything. And I think that is something I haven't done. I think I've always stuck to the bitter end of whatever it is to make sure that we get to an outcome that, whether we're happy, sad, or whatever that outcome is, there is an outcome, and we can all then learn from it and then move on, so that hopefully we don't repeat challenges that we've had in the past. And that's really key. And I think that's a really interesting thought, now I've just had it,
Hmm.
about being open
Yeah.
about challenges. Because then if you're open about challenges, people learn
Yeah.
and people understand, and they can relate to it.
Hmm.
And relating to things is the most key thing around these days, isn't it? Because then that's what makes you understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So you sort of dabbled in some marine work as well. Some marine projects were delivered. What were the main challenges to overcome switching from an offshore based sort of work?
Well, yeah, the marine stuff. I've loved delivering marine works, and obviously that the marine elements are all about having to bloody work with the tide and with the
Yeah.
sea, and just it does take you a little bit of time initially, because you do think you can hold back the sea and you can hold back tide. It takes you a little bit of time to adjust to that and get it into your head that actually, no, this is what we have. We have these tides, and this is what we have to do. And yeah, the realization that it's expensive, it's unavoidable. You cannot do marine work cheaply. You just have to face facts that it's going to cost you to deliver it. That is the way it is. But yeah, that is about having the right people with that right understanding of what can be achieved within those set hours. And you have to come up with some clever solutions, and you have to come up with some clever ideas to make that a reality. And so I think that was the biggest thing I took from it, was the acceptance that I wasn't in control,
Hmm.
that the tide and the sea were in charge of me, and me and my team would have to just achieve what we could in the time that it would give us. And once you then considered the weather, getting involved, especially in moving barges around or using jackups and all those kind of things, which are so sensitive to the elements and everything that goes with it. Yeah, that realization that you made the best of what nature gave
Yeah.
you, I guess, is where you are, and from that you could then deliver what you wanted to. And we built some great stuff out in the water, and thoroughly enjoyed my time doing that. I think one of my favourites, which was inland water actually, was out on the Isle of Wight, where we built a new oh, what is the name of it? Escape me now. A new piled structure with precast elements to put houses on
Okay.
in a marina. And it was a fantastic job. It was superb. We had crawler cranes, tubular piles. We had everything you wanted for a big marine job, but it was in a marina, so it was cut off from everything else. So it was all controlled, and it was a fantastic project. I absolutely love that, because there was about 16 of us as a team, and everyone went to town, pulled their weight, and delivered a superb project there, which was good for the
Hmm.
business, good for the marina
Yeah.
itself, not so great for the guy who was in charge of that development, who was Dominic Chappelle.
Okay.
That guy, if the name rings a bell in the news, who was, I think he might be in prison now for buying, was it BHS, I think, and then kind of got involved with the pension funds. So he was our client at the time.
The one that kind of stripped them down,
Fascinating
took
project.
out 300 million for himself, and then went, "Oh, we're bankrupt." Oops. Is that the person you're referring to?
Yeah. That would be the one. Yeah. But yeah, he didn't pay for it. I think that the bank paid for it anyway, that job. But yeah, it's a fantastic place. If you ever get a chance to go to Island Harbour on the Isle of Wight, it's got a beautiful jetty with houses on.
It sounds amazing. I'll have to have a look if I go there. So you've worked also on some Ministry of Defence projects as well. RAF Portreeve, based for the chemical weapons. I don't know what you can even say about that, to be honest. If it's chemical weapons there, etc.
Well, yeah, it was a massive ground investigation, Michael. When it comes down to it, it was an incredible job, and it was there at that base. They had in the past kind of had a certain factory there that had done some stuff that was thought to be the right thing in the First World War. They'd never used anything or done anything with it, so they demolished the factory at its location. But the southwest coastal path goes around the perimeter of that base, and the cliffs are falling away, so they had to move the footpath, and that would be into the base's property. So they had to make sure that there was no traces of anything untoward from what their operations they'd done in the past. So we were engaged to just undertake a load of trial pits, dig loads of trial pits in this area to make sure it was clear of rubble and clear of what they'd actually demolished in the past. But because of the risk due to, certain agents that might have been there, we did that in a huge inflatable structure, which was built by Per Lindstrand, if that name rings a bell. He was the balloonist that was with Richard Branson when they tried to go around the world in their hot air balloon. So he built this inflatable tent, which we then would use and move around the area, set it up, and then within that tent, we would have a JCB 22-ton excavator, but its engine was outside of the tent, and it was powered through umbilical cords back into the tent. This was all because if they encountered anything untoward within the tent, it wouldn't, ruin that machine, which was worth £250,000. It could just be cleaned and then used elsewhere. The actual inflatable structure was negative pressure. So if there was a hole appeared in it, air would suck in to the inside of the tent instead of blow out. This was just in case there was anything untoward within the tent. So we all went through some training about how to deal with things. We all wore very fancy suits. And for the summer of, I can't remember which year, we inflated and deflated this tent around the airbase, digging lots of trial pits, trying to find or looking for traces of what was there many years ago and what had been buried there. But nothing came of it. We found no traces of anything. But it was an absolutely bonkers project because you just had trailers of air conditioning units and generators moving around the place. Then you'd inflate this tent, and it had clean ends and dirty ends for where people went in and came out. It was amazing what we went to just cross off any slight chance that anything encountered would be a problem. It really was. It was like civil engineering, but not as we know it. It was just really quite extreme. And we had people there present all the time from the MOD looking after us with regards to what we may find when we were there. But like I say, throughout the whole process, we found nothing. So as I understand it, the area was cleared and that coastal path has now moved over. But it's amazing the lengths you have to go to actually do some simple things just to prove that actually there isn't anything of any concern in the first place. But it was a great job. really fantastic time we spent down there.
Sounds like a very interesting job from what you've been saying, and quite unique as well.
Yep.
Okay, so in your kind of role as, business development, which is kind of what you're doing now, you must. So I kind of see on LinkedIn you do these lunch and learns for BAM Ritchie. So you must be pretty confident,
Yep.
and you are pretty confident, presenting, etc., and talking to strangers, that sort of thing. Now, for some people who are not that good at it, including myself, do you have any kind of advice on that, or is that just a kind of born thing?
No, it's not born at all. It's taken me quite a while to get back into things
Yes,
post-COVID.
yeah.
Because obviously I'm, doing this role. I moved into it in 2017, I think, 2017, October 2017. And so I had no experience of doing what I do now. And I was just replacing the guy who was there before me, who had retired from the business. And so I've came in and kind of had some good mentors in Nuttall that have helped guide me and assist me, and also in Ritchies to kind of give me a steer. But mainly I've been left to my own devices. I'm comfortable talking about things that I know about, and I think that's the biggest bit of advice when it comes to presentations, is to just know what you're going to talk about, know your content. Don't present ad hoc. Don't present somebody else's presentation. Don't do something you're not fully comfortable with. You need to just, and I'm not saying that's a no, as in know the ins and outs of everything, because I don't. Like I say, that when I moved across to Ritchies, it was into ground engineering, geotechnical engineering, GI, all of that. Things I hadn't done because I was a civil engineer for all those years beforehand, delivering a lot more general stuff that included that, but not specific. So I didn't know the ins and outs, and I still don't today know the ins and outs of everything that we do as a business. But I don't need to, because I know the people who do. And that's, for presentations, the key thing is to know what you're going to talk about. And if there's any questions you don't know the answer to, just tell people you don't know the answer. It's nothing to bloody hide behind. And if you do start embellishing things, or trying to get over something that's not quite right, or you're not sure about, it will come back round again. Like I've said earlier, these things come back round and you will get found out. So honesty is always the best policy. Meeting strangers and all that kind of stuff, well, the reality is you walk into that room, most of that room are stood in exactly the same shoes as you, so it makes no difference. Just go and talk to somebody, because the reality is, in BD and all of that, it only comes from conversations. And that's what COVID took away from it all, was the chat, the crack, just getting to know somebody. Because once you got into the world of digital BD meetings, they're all transactional, aren't they? Everybody wants to get something out. I'm giving you half an hour of my time. What am I getting for it? And you lost the soft bit of all of it. It was okay for existing relationships, because you could call people up, have a chat, because you knew them already. But starting new relationships through COVID was really difficult. And so I've done a couple of years of pre-COVID learning what BD and what Ritchies wanted me to do. Then COVID came and shut me in a room for 18 months, ridiculously busy, because we had the busiest time we've ever had as Ritchies. And now coming back out into it, lots of people work from home, so they don't really appreciate you turning up at their door, knocking on their door and saying, hey, all right, catch up and a coffee. That doesn't quite work. So I think digitally, for internal meetings and dealing with people, is brilliant. It's perfect. We've made that change now. And so that's massively reduced charging around the place. But new relationships, I'm very much back out there, events and conferences, and knocking on people's door to see if I can get in front of them, because those first meetings are so key. And they really, in my belief, is they need to be face to face, because then you get a feel for people and you just get a lot more out of those meetings, just through body language, or just from what else they might want to chat about while they're there. Whereas digital meetings, you can tell people might be looking up at the clock, or looking down there wondering what message has
Yeah.
just popped up. So, they're never
Yeah.
really present. So I think that's it. But yeah, if you walk into a room at an event and there's loads of people there just as nervous, if not more
Hmm.
nervous than you, there will be some who will walk around
Hmm.
as if they own the place. That's fine. That's their nature. But you just find your own feet. It's not difficult. And you might just end up bumping in. What happens to me now is I go to events and people either recognize
Yeah.
me from LinkedIn.
Yes.
So you're
Yeah.
Matt, which is, and that LinkedIn thing is very
Yeah.
important in this role because it's visibility for the business, not for me. I don't do it in any way for me. It's to
Hmm.
make sure the business gets visibility
Yeah.
from what I say about it. Or I've bumped
Hmm.
into people before because when you start doing the circuit, you soon realize the value of where to be
Yeah.
and where not to be, and then you soon realize that actually a lot of this you reduce actually the amount of people you really do want
Yeah.
to talk to and see. So now I'm in a much better place where I've got a much better control over my diary because when I started out I was
Hmm.
going everywhere. Now I just go a little bit more focused with everything that I do because it all takes time and
Yeah,
effort
it
to be
does. You spread
everywhere.
yourself too thin. You're not going to get anything done. You're going to feel frustrated,
Yeah,
and uh, and BAM
no,
will be
no.
looking at you saying, "Why have we not made any progress this week?" I suppose. So you've mentioned BAM Ritchies.
Yeah, well, fortunately, they don't
You
ask
know?
me every week that question, Michael. I'll be terrified if they
Yeah,
did.
this will spread out over 3 months. Ask me in a couple of months. I've got Netflix to do today.
Yeah, yeah,
So in terms of so BAM
yeah.
Richies, then you very much, and it comes across from talking to you here when we were speaking at an event, geotechnica. So you're very proud of kind of BAM and what BAM Richies does. So I don't know if you could sort of share a little bit more about that. Tell us
Yep.
a little bit about the BAM apprenticeship scheme.
Yeah, well, there's many reasons I'm kind of proud of what BAM is. The fact that they've put up with me for 22 years is a
Yeah.
good plus. They've supported me in changing my career, which many other employers might not have done. Or they might have said, well, if you don't want to do that, then you can, off you go
Hmm.
then, or whatever it may be. So the fact that I've managed to be able to do that makes me very fond of them in the fact that I'm still here doing what I'm doing, and I have some good friends
Yeah.
throughout the whole of the business. And yeah, and Ritchies, I love the fact that they are one thing that they're a bit reminiscent of what BAM Nuttall was when I joined
Hmm.
back in 2001, because then BAM Nuttall were a 300 million
Okay.
pound company and you
Yeah.
knew just about everybody. Now Nuttall are a 1.2 billion pound
Yeah.
company and it's quite different. Whereas Ritchies are a 70
Yeah.
million pound division that operate quite independently due to the nature of their
Uh-huh.
work in ground engineering, geotechnical, and the fact that we work for a lot of external customers. So we work for a load of
Yeah.
BAM Nuttall's competitors. And we do know everybody in Ritchies. So that's fantastic. And yeah, and the fact that that I'm the firm believer in apprenticeships and everything that stands for. The fact that Nuttall have a very clear and a very strong apprenticeship program, I think it's just great because, like I said at the beginning, I just think the traditional route is there for whoever it fits, but a more non-traditional, especially the fact that today is such an instant age we live in. The younger people instantly want to know this, that, or be able to do this, be able to do that. And I think being able to step into an apprenticeship after coming out of your education and understanding what the real world is like while you're learning and being paid for that to happen as well, I think is a brilliant opportunity. It's funny actually, because some graduates that go the traditional route to then come out into projects it's a real shock to them, the real world and what is expected of them in work. And you don't get that through apprentices. They grasp it and they are introduced to it through that process. So I think BAM have it kind of set up. You can do level 4 or the level 6. So level 4 is like the BTEC equivalent at the front end, and then the level 6 is you kind of do the apprenticeship up to degree level. So I love that, and I think that's a route for many people, that you can still get that pride and still get that progress in getting to that degree, but you do it in a more work-based route, but with all that academic support and all that academic work you'll be doing and relating it to what you're doing back on the project you're connected to. And I think I've said it a number of times, that relatability, that fact that you can point at that and say, I did that in the classroom and I've done that there in my job. Wow, I'm glad I'm learning that then to be able to do this. It's just, that's just what you need to make people really buy into it and really engage into it. I just think it's just a no-brainer, and nobody should ever think it's a lesser route to doing the more traditional route. You're still getting to the same place, but I think you're just getting it with a much broader base and a much stronger understanding of what you're going to be doing, if you choose that career in civil engineering.
So how was the business itself to understand? Was that a little bit more challenging?
Well, yeah,
business
actually moving
aspects?
across into Ritchies and then kind of understanding, here's 8, when I joined, 8 particular things that we do as a business. What's all that about?
Yeah.
And to be honest, I'm still learning that today, because the business is always evolving. It's always doing different things. And so it's always kind of investing and looking for what they need to focus upon for the future, which is obviously great for me and for me to understand that and to be able to market that and talk to people. But yeah, trying to get my head around the drill and blast part of the business and how that operates and their customers and what their needs are, and then relating that to the ground investigation bit that's over in the north, the south, and up at Transpennine, and getting to understand what our offering is there, what our limitations are, what is it we don't want to do, what is it we do want to do. And so I say, that hasn't gone away. That's always there, and I always recognize when I should stop talking when I'm in meetings and let others do the talking. And I think that's key. Knowing what you don't know is one of my key laws of life. There's no point trying to blag that you do know it or whatever, or no point just pushing on down a dead end. If you don't know it, you don't know it. And I find that, I get fortunately to sit in a lot of meetings with a lot of clever people. And from that, I take a few notes, which I think are the key takeaways for me, just to broaden my understanding and just to bolt on to what I can then discuss going forward. There's never a day I have that I don't learn something new. And then I'll go home, tell my kids, and my kids go, "Oh, really?" Okay. But to me, it's so so key to me being able to do my job the best I can. I have to share the best of the business in these conversations I have with my customers. If I'm not doing that, then I'm not doing my job. There's no point us doing great things in our company and our people doing great things if I'm then not making customers aware, because those great things may just be the perfect solution to the problem those customers have. So it's a never ending problem, but it's something I revel in, because I love learning new stuff about what we do, and then being able to share that with people is great. It's an honor, you'd argue, because I get to be a mouthpiece of a business that does fantastic things.
Yeah. And do you think that all the people now, they kind of understand the full importance of the ground investigations and sort of the benefits it can bring, or do you come across people who still don't? I would imagine you do. Some see it as a kind of necessary evil, etc.
Nothing's changed in the almost 6 years I've been in Ritchies. From the first conference I went to, the first presentation was about the importance of getting your GI done right. And I guarantee this year I'll go to conferences and that same presentation will exist. No one's, I say no one's learned. Mega projects, HS2, Lower Thames Crossing, TRU, they've spent millions on ground investigation,
Yes.
which is great. Whether it is actually used as well as it should be in delivery is another question. But yes, mega projects can see it, but I'm not convinced they've sweated it enough based upon how much they've spent on it. But then outside of that, no, there's way too many customers out there that don't get what they value they can get out of a good ground investigation. To me, it's just fundamental to the success of a project. You cannot, and that doesn't mean you've got to spend a fortune on it. You've just got to make sure it's an intelligent investigation, so it's actually focused on what you want to achieve in your solution afterwards. The GI isn't something you think of ad hoc and get done and then crack on doing something over here regarding your foundation design. You come up with your concept, you do your GI to prove it, and then you move on and maybe trim it, rationalize it, because your ground investigation has given you the answers, which enables you to make those right decisions. Too many customers still see it as an unnecessary expense, but they have to do it, in my view, from walking around and still getting involved with people who don't want to spend an extra 10k 20k on a bit more GI, but weirdly when things go a bit south in delivery, have an extra £1 million laying around to sort that problem out. Well, what'd you do that for? Why don't you spend 15 grand at the beginning, do that, and you wouldn't have to spend that £1 million. But it's really difficult to put that in context to customers, because the reality of it is you don't know how much you could potentially save them until it's gone wrong. And that's the weird thing. But targeted, informed GI is the right approach. It's just too often I see it done as borehole here and every 20 meters along the run of the job and do all this standard stuff, please. Which just doesn't. That's not what it's there for. It's an investigation, and any investigation has to be planned, thought through, thorough, and you then draw conclusions. If you don't do all of that in your ground investigation, then you're not getting the value out of it. So I'm not saying spend loads, just spend the right amount in answering the questions that you need to ask.
Yeah. But that's kind of most of the issue, isn't it? With so obviously with HS2, they have deep pockets. They don't mind spending more because they have more, and I suppose it's public facing as well. It's very easy for things to go wrong, and it's quite an unpopular project with some people. So people are dying for things to kind of go wrong to jump on and advertise as well. 100%. I suppose.
And they've continued. The main JVs have continued to spend money on GI in very targeted areas to minimise risk, because the GI is risk mitigation, and people need to, understand that fuller. But also, to pick up on the GI is the bit about the amount of existing data that sometimes already exists for certain projects and certain sites, which should be able to be used in a better way, but because of liabilities and all those kind of things, doesn't get sweated enough for its value. So there's still those ongoing issues about who owns the data and who can rely upon it and those kind of things. But there's not enough done in the right way. I think people do their GI. I just don't think they do it well enough and use it well enough, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, so it's more of just a tick box. It's more of it's step 2 in the process of, building this project there, I suppose. Yeah. But no, I mean, I suppose it'd be interesting to speak to the same people who wanted to, to not pay out for the precise sort of and accurate ground investigations, and then something had gone wrong, and what their opinion is then, and if it has changed, then can you please tell others about it, please? Because this is inevitably what will happen in other projects, and it will cost more money. I went on a job and we built a small house builder, building a few houses. They didn't get a proper ground investigation done, and they found a load of voids in the ground, mine workings, etc. So they had to get drillers there, grout, and they spent so much money doing that. They basically made no money. And if you have to create free houses to make no money,
Yeah.
just what do you need to do?
Yeah, and that's
you must.
Yeah, and that's one of those horrible examples, isn't it? Because I guess even the reality is, if he did the proper ground investigation at the front end on on a small plot, on a small scale, that more likely would have seemed like a big lump of money. So you can logically see their thinking. I won't do one, but the saying is, you pay for your ground investigation whether you want to or not. So that's the cold light of day, and the risk mitigation is to do it. An appetite for risk is not to do it and hope it doesn't materialize.
Exactly. So sustainability.
Yep.
So I think you're quite a passionate person in relation to sort of sustainability.
Yep.
How do you promote it in your current role and in sort of outside of your role in your personal life?
Oh yeah, well it's we've I think we're too far down the line now. We've all got a personal responsibility to do something. So yeah, outside of work, I'm lucky enough that through BAM I can have an electric car as a company car. So do that bit. Minimize travel, use trains, just do everything to try and just make the best choice when I have to go places and do travel. And like I say, outside of work in my personal life, we got a lot of things doing the right thing instead of just making changes that must be better than not making changes. Because the fact is, we have to do things different for a better future, for a better outcome. We cannot crack on doing the same thing thinking we're going to get a better future, because that's just not going to happen. And then through work, it's obviously, fortunately for Ritchies, we're part of BAM Nuttall, part of Royal BAM Group, so we're driven by their targets, which are fantastic. They're committed to it. They've got the people, the investment. They're making sure that we are going to be on we're on that road to net zero, and I think they've change their target to 2030, that we are very much looking at not having trying to think now, reducing our carbon footprint by 2030, which was 2050. So we've done a major step change in the business to achieve that. And that's quite tricky in the ground engineering geotechnical world, because it's quite concrete and steel intensive. But we're obviously implementing all those opportunities around lower carbon concrete, lower carbon steel, HVO fuel, which I'm not saying is the right step, but it's a better step than diesel. So we're doing that, which reduces things at the moment. Obviously, there's conversations to be had around that, and we're trying to do more things locally. We're trying to make sure that, because one of the biggest carbon footprint issues about projects isn't the job itself, it's where every bloody person comes from to get to and from that job on a daily basis. So we're trying to do things better in that respect and make sure that we are minimizing those movements to reduce that impact and everything that goes with it. But I think there's still a huge pressure on the industry, the civil engineering sector, to convince this government, convince the government, I won't say this, I'll take politics out of it, but to convince governments that we're ready to do net zero construction, to be more sustainable, to deliver on their aims and their goals. But at the moment, procurement from government isn't addressing that, isn't demanding that. So I think the civil engineering sector has to come together and push up and say, look, dictate how you're going to award work through net zero demands, sustainability issues, and those kind of things. And there was I was at a conference a week or two ago up in Scotland, Advanced Nuclear Research Centre conference. So talking way above my academic level, Michael, don't worry about it. And it was great to be there, because that's what I loved about it. All these professors, PhD students, doctors of this, doctors of that. It was amazing what their thoughts were and what they were thinking. And, and they were driving this idea that we've got to convince the government and members of parliament to change, because one of their big issue was the fact that many of our MPs are, degree qualified, clever people, going back to all of that. But in the classics and in arts and history and all those things, there's not any scientists who are actually running the country or thinking about the future challenges of climate change. They seem to believe it's a linear kind of issue. So if they don't do anything today, in 5 years' time, we'll address it and we'll catch it then. Whereas it's an exponential problem, climate change. And so it was fascinating having those discussions and picking up on the fact that maybe that is the reality. We have economists, we have people who, are very smart, but they're very logical. They don't get science. They don't get what climate change really is. So maybe it's up to us, all as the people who see it and can see the bloody cliff edge coming towards us, that we create something and get them to change, to make success of winning work all about the way you're going to make sure that is protecting the future, not about scoring. Because the problem with it at the moment is we all profess to be doing certain things to score better points when things are marked in a tender. And that's bonkers. Surely if we all work together and said, this is what we're doing, and this is the standard we're going to work to, you procure on that basis, then we'd actually win, because it would make things obviously a bit more expensive, I suspect, but the future is going to be more expensive because we've got to bloody protect the planet. We've got to make sure we've all got lives in the future. So we've got to do that, and then therefore make awarding of projects will be quite level playing field, because we'd know the standard of what was being delivered would be giving this, reduced carbon footprint, net zero approach, more sustainable, and all those things. Because the reality of it is that future, climate change is the biggest opportunity going for construction, for all the sectors. How do we deliver these things that we do today? It's not about stopping delivering anything. It's about delivering it better and to suit the challenges that are ahead. And I think that's where I am with sustainability, because I haven't stopped doing anything. I just do things differently. And it's, it's not painful, it's not difficult. It's just, it's just what we've got to do. The future is going to be different. We can't avoid it. And so therefore you might as well embrace it. And, if you're changing and you've got kids, the kids are seeing that change around them. And so hopefully they'll be pretty rounded and sensible when they're a bit older, and it all grows from there, doesn't it? Because that's what we're trying to do, is deliver them something which they want to bloody can still enjoy in 50 years' time, when maybe the rest of us aren't around, but they've still got to live with the kind of result of what we've created for them. So I'm a firm believer that all individually, and I think individually in that personal thing applies at work. So individually at work, we should all be pushing and promoting the right way to do things, and for us to think about doing it differently and not just relying on, that's how I did it last week, I'll do it like that tomorrow. We just need to be doing it differently tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's a good place to stick a pin in it and say thank you very much for coming on the podcast today, Matt. It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I love it. I must admit, it's always good to talk, as I say. And so I'm glad we've had this chance. And thanks very much again, Michael, for inviting me.
No, more than welcome. Very, very much fascinating conversations we have with yourself. So no, it's been really good. It's been an interesting conversation. So once again, thanks very much for your time and coming on here.
Cheers, no problem.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ground Investigation Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, then please support the show by leaving it a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. For more information on what was discussed in this episode, click the link in the show notes now.